There is a curious thing I have always noticed. Children's stories are not for children alone. They are the language in which the unconscious speaks plainly. Consider the puppet, a figure of wood obedient to craft and design, and yet animated by a desire that exceeds his maker's intention. Why does Pinocchio, a simple wooden boy, still disturb adults? Why does his quest to become real echo in our own mirror when we shave, when we scroll, when we choose? Tonight, let us listen to the wooden heart and learn what it whispers about us. Pinocchio first appeared in a little book in 1883, and since then, his face has shifted, from cheap marionette to animated icon, from moral lesson to cinematic spectacle. Yet across versions, a single line persists. A puppet longs to be a real boy. Note the scenes that recur in most tellings: the lonely workshop, the absent or idealized father, the seductions of the road, the preacher of mischief, the fall into monstrous darkness, the wail, and the eventual return, altered. These are not incidental plot points. They are structural stations in a ritual of becoming, a rite of passage disguised as children's entertainment. To understand Pinocchio is to read a cultural dream, one that maps the child's development, the social demands of obedience, and the painful work of forming an ethical self. What is desire in Pinocchio? At the surface, it is simple: to be real, to be accepted, to be loved. But desire is never so small. It is a lattice of hungers. The puppet's longing for flesh is properly a longing for continuity, a wish to be recognized as a subject rather than an object. A carved boy is an object of craftsmanship and spectacle. A real boy is a bearer of will, conscience, and continuity. This mirrors an early developmental truth. The self is not given. It is produced through relation. The child looks toward the parent, the gaze, the social mirror, and there assembles identity. Therefore, every scene in which Pinocchio seeks applause, approval, or a human touch is also a scene of identity-making. Consider his first lies. They are not merely bad behavior. They are experiments with social reality, attempts to test whether appearances will be accepted as truth. The nose that grows is most remarkably symbolic. It externalizes shame. It gives form to the invisible. In our modern lives, we may not sprout wooden appendages when we lie, but culture produces other telltale signs: a hidden tremor, a furtive scroll, a rehearsed smile. These are the new noses. Pinocchio's choices are theatrical because the psyche itself is a stage. On the left, the id, impulsive, hungry, seeking immediate pleasure, play, food, avoidance of labor. On the right, the superego, the internalized father, social law, conscience, demanding sacrifice, truth, and decorum. The puppet's misadventures are the visible enactments of this split. He wants candy and games. He is lured by the field of boys who promise fun but deliver degradation. He wants to sleep and avoid work. He becomes part of a spectacle and loses his voice. The famous cricket, the little conscience, is beaten, ignored, or dismissed. And so we learn that conscience is fragile when it is not respected early. This is the human tragedy of maturation. Without a dialogue between desire and law, one acts as either a tyrant or a victim. And let us not be romantic. The superego can be cruel. It can demand perfection. It can punish. Geppetto's craft is loving, but also prescriptive. He shapes wood into a boy with a blueprint in his head. The balance, the healthy ego, is the negotiator between these extremes. In literature, the ego's work looks like sacrifice and learning. Pinocchio only advances when he begins to choose the difficult path. Work before pleasure, truth before ease, repair before flight. These are moral acts, yes, but they are also psychical labors that integrate the self. The wail, the gorge, the darkness, is not merely a plot contrivance. It is a central psychoanalytic image. To enter the belly is to enter the unconscious, the repository of abandoned wishes, of repressed fear, of original wounds. There, stripped of performance and artifice, the puppet confronts mortality and loss. He meets silence. He meets the ruins of pleasure. He is forced to reckon with what his actions cost others. Psychically, such descents are necessary. We speak of trauma that must be remembered, grief that must be mourned. The whale becomes the theater of mourning and facing. It swallows the false self so the true self may be born. In modern terms, we see analogous episodes. The breakdown, the crisis, the long night of responsibility after a public embarrassment or private failure. Culture now calls them bad periods, and yet they are the crucibles of selfhood. The blue fairy, luminous and almost arbitrary in her interventions, functions as an ego ideal, that image of ourselves toward which we strive. She is not a deus ex machina of instant change. She is a horizon that orients action. Geppetto's love, the fairy's promise, the community's recognition. These scaffold the child toward maturity. Pinocchio is also political in the quietest sense. He is molded in an era of industrial production when the human being was being redefined by labor. The artisan becomes less original and more functional. The worker must be disciplined. Thus the tale teaches a social lesson. To be real is to be useful, to integrate into a social order. Yet the story pauses and asks, at what cost? If you become real only by complying with norms, are you truly free? This ambivalence is modernity's gift and its curse. We celebrate autonomy but penalize deviation. We praise authenticity but monetize conformity. Pinocchio's life is caught between these contradictory imperatives. Be yourself, but be productive. Be free, but be acceptable. Contemporary viewers may map this onto social media. The curated self that seeks validation, the labor disguised as play, the endless performance for an audience of strangers. Finally, the deepest moral of Pinocchio is not obedience for obedience's sake, nor punishment for misdeed. It is the notion of reparative will. Realness is not a certificate, it is an activity. It appears in acts that repair harm, returning to the Father, rescuing those one endangered, taking up honest labor. Character is made in small, repeated choices. The true transformation is not the granting of flesh, but the accumulation of decisions that demonstrate care, truth, and endurance. Psychotherapy, I would say, practices a similar logic. One becomes a person not by abolishing desire, but by learning how to carry it, how to respond rather than react, how to answer the call of conscience without annihilating the self. Pinocchio's final scene, whether he embraces Geppetto, works, or simply stands in the morning light, is the emblem of a life that has learned to choose. So what does Pinocchio teach us at the bedside of our modern anxieties? He tells us a humble truth, that being human is not a state of being, but an ongoing craftsmanship. We are carved, yes, by parents, culture, desire, but we are also the carvers of ourselves. Each decision chips away one mask and reveals another. Each lie that fails, each shame that is named, is a small step toward form. Do not fear the whale's belly. It is not a tomb, but a workshop of truth. Do not despise the nose that shows. Our discomfort is often the body's plea for integration. And remember, the miracle is not that a puppet becomes flesh. The miracle is that a creature learns to take responsibility for the life that was given to it. If you ask me, and you did ask, to define real, I will answer simply, a real person is someone who, in the face of temptation and fear, chooses the long labor of being true. Before you go, allow me one final observation. Pinocchio only became real when he acted, when he moved from intention to gesture, from desire to decision. And you, my dear viewer, are no different. If this exploration stirred something within you, then let your gesture be simple. Press the like button, a small act, but every transformation begins with one. Subscribe, not to please me, but to remain in dialogue with the parts of yourself that these stories quietly awaken. And if you feel the impulse, the whisper of your own wooden heart, leave a comment. Tell me, what in Pinocchio's journey reflects your own? Do not be afraid. Even the puppet had to speak before he could become real.